Allison and I'm here with the Baby Lock Array. The Array is Baby Lock's 6-needle free arm embroidery machine, and it's just one step below the top of the line free arm embroidery machine, the Baby Lock Venture. The Array has an embroidery field of 7 7/8 by 11 inches, and it comes with a hoop of that same size. It also comes with a 5x7, 4x4, and 1.5 by 2 1/4 inch hoop. The Array is Wi-Fi compatible, so if you store your designs on your PC, you can transfer them wirelessly using Baby Lock's free design database transfer software. Also, if you create your own designs in Baby Lock's Palette 11, then you can transfer your designs wirelessly from Palette 11 to the Array. The Array is very easy to use and opens up a whole world of possibilities for your embroidery. We can stitch on caps, bags, shoes, onesies, tote bags, you name it, you can probably find a way to embroider on it. And the reason for that is this free arm here underneath my needles allows me to hoop and position lots of different things underneath my needles. Also, because it has multiple needles and multiple colors that we can use, if you're working with a design that has multiple colors, it will stitch from beginning to end without stopping. So really with this, efficiency is the name of the game. If you're running a business or you just like to work on a lot of different projects, you can have one machine stitching while you have the other one that you're hooping and have projects going continuously. Let's take a look at how easy the editing features on the Array are to use. We're going to grab a built-in design. And once I put the design on the machine is going to let me know how big my design is. This one is 2.74 inches by 4.8 inches. It also shows me which hoops I can use in order to stitch this design out at the size that it is. Wherever I place my design on my screen is where I'm asking the machine to stitch out. And I can move the design using my stylus, which comes with the machine, or my fingers, or the move tools that are built onto my screen, which is really handy because I can recenter it with the touch of a button. Now for sizing, I can increase the size of my design by 200%, and it's going to recalculate my stitches for me so I don't have any density issues. I can also decrease the size of my design by 60%, and again, no density issues because it's recalculating my stitches. We can rotate the design either direction by 90 degrees, 10 degrees, 1 degree, or 1/10 of a degree, and I can also reset it to its initial position with a touch of a button. We can mirror image the design, and we can also manually adjust the density. So if we're working with a lighter fabric or a much thicker fabric or something more plush, we can adjust the density to make sure that we get the correct coverage for the project. I also have a color visualizer, so if I don't want to use the colors that the design was digitized with, I can check out what it would look like if I decided to use completely different colors, and then I can reset it. We can create a border of the design that we have on the screen, either vertically or horizontally, and it will add as many will fit into my hoop. And then I can take it back to my single design. I can copy this design as many times as I like, and I can use the undo button or the delete button to take the designs off. I can add an applique satin stitch around my design, and I can either ask it to fit itself to the design, or I can use a preformed shape and size it as I need so that it'll fit and look nice around that design. I also have the option of adding a quilting fill. Now with the quilting fill, I can either use a stipple or I can use an echo fill, and I can customize how far away I want that fill to start and how large it is. When we choose our decorative fills, we let the machine know what size hoop we're working with so that it's going to create the fill specifically for that hoop size and stitch in the entire hoop. Now, I'm sure you noticed that I have a little box on the inside of my big white space here, and what that shows me is where my machine knows what size hoop I'm going to be using. So I have this set up to work with a 4x4 hoop because we're going to be stitching out a onesie, and the 4x4 hoop is the perfect size for what we need. So when I tell the machine that, it's going to give me this box to work within so I know how big my design needs to be in order to fit into my hoop and where I need to place it on my screen so that it'll stitch out in the correct place. Now I really like the way that I have everything here, but we're going to add a name so that you can see some of the font features. So we have our capital letters and our lowercase letters, and we can type out any name that we like. So as I work with my fonts, I can set my original text, and then I can go in and size the word as a whole, or I can work with one letter and select which letter I would like to work with. So if I would like the first letter to be larger, I can do that. I can also reset it to a standard size and then go back to working with the word as a whole. Now we also have the option to array our text and give it a curve, and we can modify that curve however we like. We can ask it to stair step, or we can give it a really pretty severe curve in either direction, and then we can reset it back to the straight line. We can space out our texts or bring them back in. And then if I decide that I don't care for the font that I originally chose, I can go in and choose another one. Now, some of the really fun font and text features that we have are I can separate words or phrases that I've created. So let's say I want to take off the AH and treat that as a separate design. I can ask the machine to take that off, and then we can move everything around separately. Now I can also undo it if I decide that that's not really what I wanted. And then we can combine two alphabet patterns back together. So if I separated something and decided to combine it back, I can do that also. Now my select function is also very handy because once I have everything positioned the way that I want to next to each other, I can select everything on my screen and move it all as a whole. So the machine will then treat it as one design as opposed to two separate designs that we brought in at different times. And then if I decide to center it, it'll center everything together. So we're going to take the name off, and we're actually going to go to stitch out these owls on our onesie. Now, as I do that, we're leaving our editing screen, and the next screen that we have will still allow us to rotate the design, and it'll allow us to add a basting stitch if we need to. So if we were going to put some batting under something or use a thicker fabric, the basting stitch will hold everything in place while the rest of our design stitches. We also have the option of stopping the design as it goes. So if you're working on an applique, we can put stops in so that it's not going to just continue to stitch all the way through the design. It'll stop before a color change so that we can place our fabric for the applique and then trim it. We just tell the machine exactly where we want the design to stop, and it will stop there and give us time to take care of what we need to in the hoop before we put it back in and continue on. Another feature that's really fun that we have in the array is the No Sew feature. The No Sew feature allows me to take out different parts of the design, and the machine will just continue on and act as though that stitch never existed. So for instance, let's say I really don't want the brown to be in my little baby owl. I just want the back of the fabric, the color of the fabric, to shine through in that design. So I'm going to take out every little bit of the reddish brown color. And as you can see, it took out the brown in my little baby owl. And now whatever I'm stitching onto, that'll shine through in my design. Now we are going to be stitching out the reddish brown color, so I'm going to put those back in. And now we're going to go to the embroidery screen. Now on the embroidery screen, I can see where everything is lined up. And if I decide that I want to change my colors and move things around, I can do so here. And I can also add some stops in if I prefer. However, I want to make sure that I have everything lined up in my hoop appropriately before we actually stitch. So I have a onesie hooped up for us, and each one of your hoops comes with a grid so that we can hoop everything as best as we can and make sure that everything is lined up. So on my onesie, I have a crosshair, and this is what we're going to use to make sure that everything is positioned correctly. So we're going to put it in the machine. And here in my hoop, I now have a large crosshair, a laser beam that is shining down into my hoop so that I can see exactly where the center of my stitching is going to start. If I would like to move this around on this screen before we get to stitching, I can shift my design as I need to. And you'll see the crosshair moving and is starting to line up a little bit better with the crosshair that I've written onto the onesie. Now, if I need to rotate it, I can rotate it just slightly to accommodate for those changes. And whichever direction we need to rotate it in order to get it to fit, the machine's going to accommodate for that. And we're going to be able to see how precise this is going to allow us to be with our hooping. Another good thing about this is we don't have to hoop everything multiple times or get it just perfect in order to stitch it in the correct place. This is a placement assistant that allows us a lot of grace, and we're going to be able to stitch things a little bit crooked and then change it here in this page right before we start stitching to make sure that everything's hooped correctly. It's going to stitch in the right place without us having to do a lot of work before we get to the machine. Now, if I want to see what my design is going to look like a little bit more clearly before we actually stitch it, I can do that here, and I can zoom in on it and see in a little bit more detail what this is going to look like. I can also take a look at how it's going to stitch out and what order it's going to stitch out in. And I can change the speed. And now we're going to start stitching.